we started off with the motivation because that's the most crucial part of everything we're doing. Is, why are we doing it? What's going on in our mind? What's our intention? What's pushing us? And so since usually what pushes us are our afflictions, we deliberately pause and, try and consciously cultivate a good motivation. When we're talking about monastic precepts, the motivation for taking them, and I'm not assuming that all of you will do this, because this is just exploring monastic life, but just to put this in context, the motivation when taking monastic precepts is to be liberated from cyclic existence. So that's the motivation one wants to cultivate in order to receive the precepts. And even in the Tibetan tradition, where we talk so much about bodhicitta, still it's that motivation of renunciation, wanting to be free of samsara. That's the motivation for receiving the pratimoksha precepts, because there's no such thing as Mahayana monastic ordination. It's all just monastic ordination, the same straight across the board. However, when we are really trying to develop bodhicitta, in our practice, bodhicitta being the aspiration for full enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, then we want to apply that bodhicitta to everything we do. And so, even though it's not required for taking the monastic precepts, we still generate it. We still come back to that motivation because it's such a powerful motivation and so inclusive and really reaching out to all living beings. And so we always generate that at the beginning so that we get very familiar with somehow the big view, instead of just thinking my Dharma practice, my liberation, what's good for me, what do I want, how am I going to be free, how am I going to have the best conditions for meditation, how am I going to study what I want to study. Do you see one word that came up a lot in all that? And that's the one word that we're trying to investigate in the higher training of wisdom, is who in the world is this I that wants all these things, okay? And so we're trying to really expand things to go beyond ourselves and to think of our practice not just for us, but for everybody. And I think so much now, especially Western culture, but it's happening in the East too, there's so much emphasis on the individual, on individual achievement, individual accomplishment, individuality. Everybody has to have their own room, their own computer, their own this and that. That's in the U.S., that's the best way you can be kind to your kids, is to give them their own room with their own computer, their own iPod, their own cell phone. And then you talk to your kids like this, even though they're in the next room. So we're so much focused on the self and the individual. And I think that winds up leaving us feeling rather lonely. And, in creating a community, the Buddha, wanted us to support each other and to be together as a community of people who really had a common purpose and cared about each other and supported each other in our aspiration for liberation. And so that requires that we come out of ourselves. That it isn't just about me and my practice and what I want. It's taking care of everybody. And, so that starts, especially with the people that we're living with. And then it expands beyond that to the people in the country, the planet, the solar system, and, then all sentient beings. But really broadening our take from, me, I, my, mine, to, seeing that our whole life, our whole existence is dependent on the kindness of others. And so just thinking about our own benefit, and what's good for me in my spiritual life is really rather limited. Yeah. And it makes us lonely sometimes, whereas when we really reach out with an open heart towards others, then that loneliness dissipates. Because we see we're surrounded by sentient beings who have been kind to us. Yeah. So instead of sentient beings who are going to drive me nuts so I can't practice the Dharma, we see sentient beings who are kind to us. Okay. I say that because when I was a baby nun, I remember standing and talking to some other people and thinking, that what they're talking about is so boring. Why don't they just shut up? I want to go meditate on compassion. And at that time, I didn't see how contradictory my way of thinking was, And, of course, there was some growth over the years. Thank goodness. But this is the kind of thing I tend to point out to other people in case they have that same problem that I do. Okay, so we're just starting the Exploring Monastic Life program now, and we'll be going on for about, 17, 18 days, something like that. There'll be a day in the middle that's kind of a flex day, but otherwise we'll keep the same schedule. And even on the flex day, the meal times are the same, and morning and evening meditation are the same. I don't know when that day is going to be, so you can't spend too much time looking forward to it. I'll let you know when we come to it. Okay, but in doing the program, there's a few things that we want to really be especially attentive to. And so one, like I just spoke of, is our motivation, especially having a motivation of compassion and kindness towards others. And so this shows in functioning together as a community. And so this program really is about community life. And you're going to be part of this community for 2.5 weeks. So everything that happens, you're going to be a part of, and you'll know about, well, maybe not everything, but, most of the things. So, for example, we're, hoping to start start construction on Chenrezig Hall. If it turns out that we're able to do it before the end of the program, you're going to be part of, blessing the land and watching the ditch get dug, and, and in the meantime, before that happens, chanting Om Mani Padme Hung and doing lots of dedication prayers so that we can get this hall built for beings, okay? So in other words, when you're coming here, you're really being part of the community. It's not that, you've come here on a program, and so now we're going to do something for you. If you get what I mean? Sometimes we go somewhere and our thought is, well, what am I going to get out of this? Yeah, what are they going to do for me? What am I going to get out of it? And that's not our intention here. When it's exploring monastic life, we want you to have the experience of, being part of the community. So doing the dishes, helping with the chores, being part of creating the harmony in the community and helping people out, following the daily schedule, all these things that are just part of living together in monastic life. Okay, so don't see us as kind of doing something for you so that you're going to have something to take away with you, but rather see it as we're all in this together, co-creating what's going to happen in the next 2.5 weeks. Okay, is that making some sense? You getting some idea of what I'm talking about here? Okay, so, of course, you're coming into a new community, those of you who, are attending the program who don't usually live here, and it's a little bit like, what am I supposed to do? And I want to follow the guidelines, but I don't even know what they are, and are they going to yell at me if I do something wrong? And, no, we don't tend to yell at people, but, it's quite likely that somebody will come up and say, let me help you, or did you know this about how we do things here? And so, people will try and help you, and those of you who live here should do that. Okay? Just so that, because it's a process, I guess you could say, of socialization. Whenever you go and live in a new place, you're trying to figure out how those people do things and how you're going to fit in and everything. So, there's some feeling like that at the beginning, like, where do I fit in? Yeah, but I think all of us are asking ourselves that. It's not only you. Okay, so compassion, community spirit, those are two very important things. And then mindfulness and introspective awareness. And what I mean by that is not only being aware of what we're doing when we're doing it, but being aware of what our precepts are, and being aware of our values, and being aware of how we want to be in the world. Having our mindfulness focused on those things, and then the introspective awareness checking up and seeing if we're in fact doing that. Okay? So, by introspective awareness, those of you more familiar with Theravada, Bhikkhu Bodhi translates it as clear knowing, samprajana. Okay, so that's the mental factor that's kind of checking up. What am I doing, and am I living according to the way, what my precepts and values are, and how I want to be. And in our meditation, mindfulness focuses on the object of our meditation, and then clear knowing or introspective awareness checks up and sees if we're still on our object of meditation. So those two mental factors focus both in our daily life and ethical conduct as well as in our meditation. Okay, so we'll be exercising both of those. And then, of course, so those are things to keep in mind that we, want to keep with us. And then, of course, fortitude, or patience. There's two translations for the, for the same Pali and Sanskrit word. So it doesn't mean patience in the same sense of waiting for people, though sometimes that may be entailed. But it means fortitude in the sense of willing to challenge yourself, willing to not crumble in the face of things that are difficult, or in the face of suffering experiences, in the face of hardship, and so not just kind of feeling like, I can't handle this, and freaking out, but having that sense of fortitude that sees something new or something difficult as a challenge, and takes that upon ourselves willingly as something to practice with. Okay, so that's a very, very important mental factor that's necessary for living in community, because there's going to be lots of things that happen that in community that you don't agree with and you don't like. I'm telling you right now, And there's always lots of things. And so if every time we meet something that we don't like, then we say, but, it should be this way, you should do it that way. then we're really losing out on the opportunity to train our minds. Yeah? Because the training of the mind, is about looking at how our mind is reacting and learning to make our mind more flexible and adaptable. Of course, if something's wrong, completely ethically damaging, or something, is impractical, or something is dangerous, then of course, saying something is certainly warranted. But to really take the chance to be with conditions that are new and unfamiliar and make them something that you practice with, instead of something that you rebel against, or something you want to change, or something you complain about, So again, it's this whole thing of, what's the source of my happiness and suffering? Is it what's going on outside? Is it what other people are doing? Is it the schedule? Is it the offering service, that makes me happy, that makes me miserable? Or is what's going on in my own mind the thing that's making me happy and miserable? Okay? And so we always have to come back to this, because our old habit is outward. That's going to make me happy, so I want this. And that's making me miserable, so I want to change it. Yeah. And so then we're continually trying to change everybody and everything. But that's what we did before we came to the monastery. So if we're going to continue that same old habit pattern, what's the use of being in a monastery? Because we come to a monastery to change our mind. We come to a monastery to overcome the source of our suffering, which is our own mind that is so filled with attachment and aversion. Yeah? So of course we have so much energy behind our attachment and aversion, and it's going to come up all over the place. But that's what I mean by fortitude. When it comes up, instead of following it, to step back and say, wait a minute, this is my attachment and aversion. This is why I came here, because I realize that my attachment and my anger and my ignorance are the source of my suffering, and these are the things that I want to overcome. So I'm going to work with them right now. Okay? So this is really hard work. Yeah, it's very hard work, because it means overcoming, eons full of habituation to looking at the outside and wanting to change the outside, instead of looking inside and looking at, what are my buttons? What am I clinging to? And changing what's going on inside. Okay? So we're all in the same boat, and it's hard for all of us. But that's why we all practice together in community, because then we know that everybody is trying to do the same thing. And we know everybody's having a hard time of it. So we support each other in doing this. And we encourage each other in doing it. And we talk about how to do it. Whereas when you're outside in the unreal world, then everybody's just encouraging your attachment and your anger and all your opinions and everything like that. And, so it becomes quite difficult to practice, because people don't understand what in the world you're trying to do. Okay, so that's kind of what we're trying to do here. And, I really, as things come up, please voice what your concerns are, and voice your concerns in the language of, I'm having difficulty with XYZ, can you help me? Yeah, or this kind of doubt is coming up in my mind, this kind of affliction is coming up in my mind. I don't understand how to work through this. Please help me. And if you voice things in that way, people will definitely help you. kind of like a Martian wearing this thing. I probably look like one too. Okay, any questions so far? No. Okay, so the first teaching on first day of EML, I always tell the story of the Buddha's life in my own way. Yeah. Pointing out the things that have been especially important to me about the Buddha's life, because I think that not only were the Buddha's teachings important, but his life was an example for us. So, yeah, they say Buddha was born as the son of a regional prince, a regional king. Actually, they were starting to have republics, small local republics at the time of the Buddha. So his father was probably, the leader of one of those republics, and as parents do, parents want the absolute best thing for their kids. And they want their kids to be everything that they weren't able to become. Yeah? Because parents love their kids. And so whatever parents feel like, whatever is good in my life, I want my child to have. And whatever I wasn't able to have, or wasn't able to do, or wasn't able to be, I want my child to be able to have and do and be those things. Okay? So, the Buddha's father felt that way. His mother died a week after he was born, so he was brought up by his aunt and stepmother. But, together, both of them wanted the best for this young prince. So, yeah, being they're like parents of the generation of most of you, and so they gave their kids everything, everything the kids wanted. So the post-World War II American prosperity mindset of give your kids everything, the best education, the best friends, the most comfortable thing. They shouldn't have to do any work around the house, other people clean up for them or clean up after them, and you're brought up just in a very self-indulgent way, but the only thing you have to do is to meet all of your parents' expectations. Okay. Is this sounding familiar in any way? So, that's the way the Buddha was born. He got the best of everything, and his parents didn't want him to go out and see the world because they were afraid of what would happen to him. He might get hurt. He might get damaged, and especially because there was a soothsayer that said he'll either be a political leader or a religious leader. His father, of course, his mother wanted him, I don't know, Ma Prajapati. She might have been different. I think she had a different mindset, but definitely his father wanted him to be a political leader. My son's got to be rich, he's got to be famous, he's got to be powerful. And so brought him up that way, and he wasn't allowed to see many things in life. Okay? And I think in a way, many of us were brought up in that way. We weren't allowed to see many things in life that our parents thought would be dangerous or traumatic for us. We may have had unintended traumas and danger in our family, in our lives, but certainly what our parents were trying to do for us, we were in many ways quite coddled compared to how people live in other countries and what children are exposed to in other countries. But the Buddha, being very curious, about life. Well, he wasn't the Buddha at that time, so Prince Siddhartha, was very curious. So he did what a lot of us did, and he snuck out when his parents weren't looking. So, I don't know if that pertains more to my generation or your generation. Yeah, but we often went doing a lot of things without telling our parents what we were doing, because our parents would have had a conniption fit if they knew what we were doing. Yeah, so so he snuck out when his parents weren't looking, and with his charioteer went into town. And there he saw what's called the Four Messengers. So the first time he went out, he saw an old person, I think a sick person. I can't remember if it was a sick or an old person first. Anybody remember? What? Old. The old? Okay. So the old person first. And he had never seen somebody that old and that decrepit before. Similar to how in our society now, if you're very old, you're usually put in a home and nobody sees you. You don't live in the family now like they did in previous centuries, but you live in a special home. And so, young people don't really know much about old people and what they go through, what their lives are like, what the pain of having an aging body and an aging mind is like. So he didn't know what that was when he saw it. And of course his charioteer had to explain to him what old age was all about. And it was rather a shocking thing. And Siddhartha began to think, well, one day too I will be old. Now, many of us know one day too I will be old, but we know it up here. We don't know it in here. Okay, he felt it in here. Okay, the difference is we know it up here, but we don't really think that that's going to one day happen to us, that we're going to look in the mirror and an old, wrinkled face is going to look back at us. And, that our body is just going to be completely mush, that can't do what we want it to do. And that it's going to be hard to remember things, and we're going to be disoriented. We don't really think that that's going to happen to us. We kind of think, well, okay, I might get old, and I'll have some gray hair and a few extra wrinkles. But I'm still going to be able to do everything I was able to do when I was in my 20s. And my mind's still going to be as sharp as it was before. Yeah? Don't we? Yeah? Some of us are older than others. Still, it doesn't matter how old you get. You still feel like you're young and at the beginning of your life. And even though you become more forgetful and you have more aches and pains, somehow I'm really not going to be an old person. Somehow that's going to happen to other people, but it's not going to happen to me. Okay, so that really struck him, thinking that I too can be like that. And instead of looking at aging and saying, oh no, where's the Botox? And what color am I going to dye my hair? And I've got to go to the gym and, doing everything to fight aging. He saw aging as just part of the human condition. Not something that you fight against, but something that's part of the human condition, and therefore as a reason to propel us to get out of cyclic existence. Okay? So he went back to the palace. He was quite moved by that experience. Second time he went out, he saw a sick person. And again, he had never really seen that before. My niece just had a baby. My dad was last in the hospital 6 months ago. They won't let him come near the baby because they're afraid that since he was in the hospital, that he might have some bug and give it to the baby. You know? They brought the baby over to see my dad, and somebody, my niece, who also lives in my dad's house, was sick the previous day. So they just brought the baby to the doorstep and wouldn't take him in the house because he might get sick in the house. So, you know, overprotective parents exist, don't they? I was going, oh my goodness, this poor kid. Yeah? But I mean, when parents love you a lot, they don't want you to get sick. But they also aren't realizing that you need to develop an immune system at the same time. Anyway, his parents were like that, so he didn't know what it was like to see sick people. Yeah. So again, that was such a shock to him when he went out to see somebody who was sick. Yeah, and if you've ever been around somebody who's really, really sick, it's shocking, especially when you're used to being with people who are young and energetic and everything's on and on, lots of energy, and, you know, and then you're with people who are sick. It's really a totally different kind of energy. Yeah, and so again, that experience was very shocking to him. He had never really thought about what that was like, because he was like my grandnephew, okay, overprotected. And, you know, but again, he saw it not as, well, okay, I've got to get the best doctor and all the alternative medicine and acupuncture and acupressure and this medicine and that vitamin and this thing and that thing, and take, you know, 10 zillion supplements and go to the doctor every week. But he saw instead sickness as part of the human condition, and again, as a reason to propel us to get out of cyclic existence. The third time he went out, he saw a dead person. How many of you have never seen a dead person? Never seen a dead body? Yeah? So it's something new to experience, to see a dead body. It's quite something. Yeah? Because you know there was a person there, and now that person's not there anymore. And just this stark contrast, if there was a person and now there's not a person, there's just a body. And so it makes you think, well, what happened to the person? And who was the person? And is there a continuum of that person? Or did they just completely cease to exist? And if that's going to happen to me, you know, then what is the purpose of my life, and what is the meaning of my life? Yeah, so death is the big thing that helps us to think about how to live a meaningful life. Because it really asks us, you know, when our life is over, what do we want to have to show for our life? What is important to us when we die? One of our Abbey supporters, his father just died yesterday, I think it was. And he wrote us a note because he's having to go through and clean out his father's things. And he said, it's amazing the kind of things that you stockpile that are so important to you that other people couldn't care less about. You know? And so we look at all the things that we've saved, that we feel we need, that are so important and meaningful to us. And then you think, somebody else is going to have to go through all your stuff. What are they going to find? You know, they're going to look at some of the stuff that we've kept and thought, why in the world were they hanging on to this? You know, because maybe it was some memento that's only mementoous to us and completely boring to everybody else. Yeah. But, it makes us ask, is the purpose of our life just to collect a lot of mementos and photographs? We have all these photographs. Here I am, and here I am, and here I am. It's all about me. I find it very strange. People, when I go places, they'll send me pictures of myself, and it's like, why do I want pictures of myself? I live with this body. I know this body very well. I don't need pictures of it. I find that quite strange. You want pictures of yourself. But, people really do, my life and, my relatives and everybody and everything that's important to me. Okay. But after we die, none of this stuff is very meaningful to anybody else. So it really makes us think, what's the purpose of our life? Even if we have trophies and awards and certificates and, because we've been acknowledged as the best in this field or the most innovative in that field. All those sheets of paper, all those trophies and awards, all those pictures of us shaking the hand of somebody very important. Don't you love those pictures? I'm not important, but here I am with somebody who is important. Who's giving me a piece of paper saying I am important. Yeah. And how meaningful those things are to us, but how completely, nobody else really cares about them very much. So, death is a big equalizer, and it's something that really makes us think deeply about what we're doing, how we're spending our time. Mm-hmm. In India, even now, and especially years ago when I lived there, you would see dead people in the railway station. Yeah, death was not hidden. You'd see dead people in the street, in the railway station. It's right there. So, so Siddhartha was quite astounded to see a dead person. And again, instead of seeing death as, something to fight against and, I can't die, I've got to prevent it, he realized that it's something that's part of the human condition, and that actually an awareness of death makes us want, again, to be out of cyclic existence more. It strengthens our renunciation, our determination to practice. And then the fourth time he went out of the palace, he saw a wandering mendicant. So at the time of the Buddha, there were wandering mendicants from all different sorts of religious traditions. And the wandering mendicants were the people who were trying to seek the path to release from samsara. And so he thought, wow, there's people who are really trying to do it. Maybe I should try and do that too. And so one night, after a gala party, when just after his wife had given birth to their first child, who was a boy, so a boy in India is like really important. Then you're really on top of the world. You have a son. And, so his wife had just given birth to a son. He had just been at an incredible party, and all the dancing girls were falling asleep on the floor and drooling, and that was very unappetizing. So he decided that he was going to leave, and he was going to join the people who had renounced the home life and gone forth to seek the meaning of life and to seek the path to liberation. So he left the palace in the middle of the night and went off. This charioteer again took him. And there's a beautiful picture of the prince in his royal clothing, but shaved with a sword, cutting off of his hair, because the Indian men used to have long hair. So cutting off his hair and then giving up his royal garments and putting on these rags and going forth as a homeless person. And of course his charioteer was in cahoots with him, but was the messenger who got blamed after he returned to the palace. So this part of the Buddha's life story is something that I find very touching and very meaningful. And I think this is part of it that is an example to us of how to live. Okay. And so many of us may or may not have had similar experiences of seeing people who are old, people who are sick, people who are dead, and wondering what life is all about. Or maybe we didn't see oldness, sickness, and death so much because our society keeps them quite hidden. But maybe we saw people who had gotten to the top in their own field, but who were still miserable. Or people who had made a lot of money but were unhappy. Or people who externally had everything, youth, beauty, fame, wealth, and yet they had a drug problem or an alcohol problem. So we may have seen what samsara is like in a slightly different way than the Buddha has. Or we may have had friends and relatives who died when we were young, and that may have made a very big impact on us. Yeah. Did any of you have childhood friends who died when they were kids? Yeah. Did it have a big impact on you? Yes. No. Yes. Yeah. Or maybe a parent who died when you were very young, and again it really made a strong impact. So we may have been expressed to samsara's nature in maybe the same way as the Buddha, maybe in slightly different ways. But somehow I think all of us here must have had the feeling that something wasn't quite right about the vision of success that we were being presented with. That something isn't quite right with society's idea of happiness and society's idea of meaning. We all had some kind of experience with that. Otherwise, I don't think you would have come to a program like this. Yeah? Otherwise, you would be out there trying to get whatever society is telling you should have, because you've bought into the package that's telling you what you need in order to be happy and successful. So it takes a lot, I think, of deep thought and of internal sensitivity to really come to the conclusion that society in general has got it all wrong. That happiness doesn't come from outside. That the source of happiness is inside. Yeah? And that you can get all these things. You can have your way all you want. You can rearrange the duckies all you want. But you're still going to be trapped, bound. Yeah? Bound by what? Ignorance, anger, and attachment. Yeah? So we've all to some extent had that feeling that, external success is not going to cut it. It's not going to really bring us what we want. And so we're searching for an alternative, for something else, for what's really meaningful in our life. So that the time when we do die, we can look back and say, oh, this life had some value. Yeah? Beyond having a closet full of clothes and shoes and walls full of certificates and trophies and acknowledgments. and a whole family around you of children and grandchildren all sobbing when you die because they love you so much. Personally speaking, that's the last, I think that would be a ghastly way to die. Imagine dying with your whole family around you, sobbing and clinging on to you and saying, "Don't leave us, we love you so much, I love you, don't leave." Oh my goodness, please save me from that. I hope I didn't have the karma. I really pray I don't have the karma to die like that. Of course, I'm not quite sure my family would do that. But they certainly send in the barrage of doctors to give me every last test that would drive me crazy, you know. Yeah, I've got to save her somehow. You know, but so I think that all of us, in some way, have started to question that. Do you think? Yeah. So this is a place where you can come to pursue that questioning, and everybody understands what you're talking about. Yeah. When I was in high school, I think it was the 6-Day War. I can't remember, but one of the wars in the Middle East started on the day of the high school prom. Yeah, and in high school, the prom is the big thing. I was not prom queen. But anyway, it was the big thing, because you wore a formal gown and you had your hair done and your boyfriend brought you a corsage. And, that's supposed to mean that you're growing up. Anyway, so this war started, and I didn't feel like it was right for me to go to the prom when people were fighting and killing each other in another part of the world. I felt just inside it didn't feel right to me. And I tried to say that to my parents, and the response was, "You can't do anything about it, so just go out and have a good time." But not too good of a time. Yeah, but go out and have a good time with your friends. You can't do anything about this. So that's what I'm meaning by, if you come to a place like this, people aren't going to say that to you. Yeah, people are going to say, "Oh yeah, I understand what you're talking about. I understand what you're questioning and what your doubts are." Yeah. And I think that's important, to have places that question these things. And so in some way I see a monastery as the conscience of society. Because we have a different value here, then in some way we're kind of acting as the mirror, even though we're not trying to, we're just living our lives. But I think it functions in some way to ask society the question of, what are your values and what are you doing? And it certainly asks us those questions individually. What are my values and what am I doing? Oh, it's time to stop. And I've only gotten as far as the Buddha leaving the palace. Anybody have comments or questions so far? Anything?
When I first heard it, I thought he was, on another track. And then I had my track, and that somewhere I'd have to meet him somewhere to have a relationship with him. But as time goes on and the analogy applies very much to my own life, then the connection with him gets closer and closer, because I see his struggles and I see my struggles, and they're not that far apart.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. We may not have been born as the children of the princes or kings or oligarchs, or we might not have been Mitt Romney's kids or George Bush's kids, thank goodness. But we had some of the same struggles and questions. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think also it's like these struggles come up and you kind of choose to notice them and choose where to take them in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was thinking about my friend that died when I was younger. It really impacted my life, but I don't know, I think I went a different direction than I would go now if that kind of thing happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a kind of second thing to happen for me to realize that, like, okay, this is working, or like, that the way that I had decided after seeing my friend die was like, oh yeah, like.
Your attitude was, he died, so I should live it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh.
In a sense, but with like this deep sadness, like, oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
But then going through something again later on, I was like, this is just not. It doesn't work like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really conscious choice. Is what I'm saying.
For how to see his death.
Right.
Yeah.
Where to take it.
Right. How to have it impact you.
Yeah. So it's like even like people who don't think about this taking the path, they have those experiences, but they just don't.
They don't know how to use them. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes even numbs them even more. Like they
Yeah.
become even more disconnected to their lives because it gets put down someplace deep.
Mm-hmm.
Disconnects.
Yeah. Nathan?
So to me, the dichotomy of like material gain versus contemplative life, it doesn't hold the same sort of tension and meat for me as, how do I put it? I never found myself fighting against that specific tension as much as because I think most of my friends and my parents really understood. Or had questions about how society operated in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But that there was this other tension at work around external acts of goodness and working to sort of fix the world versus turning inward. And even if that's kind of a false dichotomy too in a lot of ways, that's the one that I found myself caught in much more.
Okay. So you're saying that you're not caught so much in the material versus the simplicity, thing, but more in, do you use your life energy to work to change the external world and make a positive contribution to society here and now, or do you live a contemplative life?
Yeah, and not that I'm not immune to that first one. I mean, I played my share of video games and lived but certainly that other one has, I'm a bit more caught in it.
Yeah, much more of a pull of, I'm young, I have talents, I can use them to do something good to change the world. Whereas if I go out and I'm a contemplative, maybe these people are right. I'm just sitting here looking at my belly button all day long, and what use is that? Yeah. Anybody else have that? Yeah. Ruby, I know you do. Sarah, yeah. So you have it. Yeah, you have it. Yeah, you have that. Yeah, you have it. Yeah. So I think, that might be one that is more challenging for us. No. And the thing is that being of benefit to people here and now is so immediate. And, there's so much suffering in the world that it seems like, we've got to do something right now. And we have the talents and abilities, and let's do something. Whereas the way of helping people through living a contemplative life or living a monastic life seems very abstract and very far away, and maybe in some 15 eons from now I'll be able to do something that's beneficial, so who wants to wait that long? I should do something now. Okay. So just some random comments on that whole thing. Yeah. Yeah, I understand that one quite well. I think there's a number of different factors playing. First of all, there's the assumption that if we ordain, we're not going to benefit anybody here and now. You know, I don't think that's a correct assumption, because I can see quite directly by our being here and, you know, having programs and having contact with the rest of society that we do directly benefit society. You know, we may not be running a school or a hospital or a refugee camp or something like that, but I can see that there is direct benefit here and now to society. Okay. Another thing that happens when you're young and you want to change the world, and it's a beautiful kind of feeling, and I think everybody should have it, and it scares me when I meet young people who don't have that feeling, you know, who are so into either video games or self-medicating that they don't care about the rest of the world. That scares me. But one thing that I learned in living that and trying to do my share is that when I am not a together person, my ability to benefit people here and now is very limited. Yeah. And because I saw that, first of all, there were situations where I acted in ways that I didn't want to act completely because my buttons got pushed. Yeah, I mean, because I was a teacher, I thought that education was the way to really make the world a better place. And it's true confession time. No, but I think it's good for you to hear some real stories about things. Anyway, I remember one of my first classrooms, there was a young boy, David Nicky, and his parents were getting divorced. And I had just kind of heard about that, but it didn't really sink in very much. And David was acting, he was a very bright kid, and usually a good kid, but he started acting out in class like, my goodness. And one day, he slammed a door, you know, a cupboard door in my face. And I said, that's it. And I took him down to the principal's office. And I guess they called his parents. They handled it after that. But I was really angry at David for doing that. And I realize now, looking back on that I had no understanding of what children go through when their parents divorce. I had no awareness of how traumatic that is for a child and how that's going to come out in a child's behavior and what a child needs when that's going on. And I look back and, you know, I had a good motivation then, but I was so ignorant that I think instead of helping David at that time, I might have harmed him. Okay, so that's the kind of thing. You see sometimes, okay, you have a good motivation, but you don't know what to do. Or you do the wrong thing. Or even worse is sometimes you become just like the people that you don't want to become like. When I went to Vietnam War protests, you know, I remember I was at UCLA and one day the cops came on campus. And, you know, the cops are lined up there and we're lined up here. And the person next to me picked up a brick. And I went, whoa, that's not the way to go about it, you know? And I began to really question that, you know, when I'm angry, then my mental state is exactly like the mental state of the person I'm opposing. Yeah. And so in any kind of social welfare project you're doing, there's so often an enemy, the people who don't care, the people who are the bureaucracy, the people who are just looking out for their own selves that you're opposing. And it's so easy to be angry at them, and then you realize, wait a minute, that's the same mentality they have, as I'm creating an enemy. And I don't have compassion for everybody involved in this situation. And so it doesn't really matter in terms mentally of what side I'm on, because our minds are both the same. So what good am I actually doing? So I think that comes up. But I'm going to ask some of the people who have, worked a lot of you have worked in helping professions. And, for your experience in doing that. We'll just go over time right now because this is what's happening, but yeah.
I just have experience with my daughter. She was just in crisis, and as a mom, I really wrestled about the best way to help her. And when her anxiety is manifesting, she really can't not calm down, and she escalates and escalates and escalates. And I realized that she was escalating, and I was escalating with her, even though I was rooted thinking that I was calm. And instead of helping her de-escalate, I was actually helping her escalate. So for me, the mind changed when I realized it's better to just be calm and be centered, even as she's going through her escalation, because keeping that calm space helps her calm down rather than what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that if I hadn't had the observation and the mindfulness to kind of look at the reaction between and the difference between my approach the one way and my approach the other way, I think it never would have clicked. The best way to help her was to remain in that calm, sort of observant, yet open space where she could come and be nurtured without having to escalate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. How about some of you who've worked in the helping professions? What have you come to from your work, this thing versus helping the world on the outside versus your inner practice?
I think what took me so long actually to come to that was that I had to, through practice, through meditation, through meditating on the Four Noble Truths, I really finally came to a realization that the long view was the only one that made any sense. And so in my work with Reiki healing, it was very immediate results to be able to relieve people's pain, or to even teach them in order to have a tool that's useful for their whole life. It was not like it was a one-shot deal. It really helped people for their whole life. But what I came to realize is that helping them for their whole life was just this one life Band-Aid problem. That no matter what I did, the cause was not addressed, no matter what. And I didn't have the skill to even address my own cause, much less anybody else's cause. And so that, I also began to realize that it's not exactly that kind of practitioner is a dime a dozen, but there are lots of those. And there aren't many who are trying to cultivate a longer view. And wasn't that kind of also responsibility to my own predilection, I guess, to cultivate something that was so precious and rare and unique while I had the chance to do something that was going to be of benefit for a way, 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 way longer time than the person on my table for this hour. So, but it took me a long time to get to that, and that was really through applying the mind again and again to what the Buddha taught, to really get the Buddha was telling the truth.
Yeah.
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 I think for me,
shocking realization was I worked in healthcare for 35 years, and I came to realize that so much of what I did was so caught up in my own ego and my own identity, and that there was a component all about me in whatever I did. And that's not to say that what I did wasn't helpful, but I just perpetuated the suffering of certainly myself and others too, through not, kind of like what Shuni is saying, not seeing clearly that what I'm doing is so limited. And what made it so limiting was how I was so caught up in myself. And that was quite a shock, actually.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
For myself is the first time that I went to a class of shiatsu, and I always had that feeling that I wanted to help, but I had a feeling come out to my throat is before you can help others, you have to help yourself. And through the years, I did tons and tons of other things, workshop, blah, blah, blah. And it's when I encountered meditation, vipassana, that's the first thing. It came really clear to me that that was the path to that's where really I was going to make a difference in my afflictions and all of that. It came really clear. I'm sure I've done a lot of work, but it's a longer path, I think. But with the Buddha's teaching, which at first that's not what I encountered, but the meditation was, it was Buddha's teaching.
Mm-hmm.
But there was something inside of me that knew that's how I was going to be able to help myself and then others.
Mm-hmm.
In a quicker way.
Yeah. Is this helpful?
Yeah. There's a quote from Merton where he says that the monastic life is the invisible axis around which the world turns. Maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, I'm not sure, but it always has made sense to me too, in that my practice has always felt quieter and more subtle than everything else in my life, and yet something about it is what centers everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, it's
Yeah.
nice to hear all the stories.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we'll stop now. I know some of the others of you look like you're going to burst.
Well, it's an important piece.
Oh, okay.
Because I also had the thing about I can't in this life achieve very much in my personal practice, so that it will have much of an impact. Like I'm not a good practitioner, meditator. I'm not that blah blah. So I can't do very much that can be of benefit. So this other is more tangible.
Mm-hmm.
But that it was totally laced with ego. And it becomes so recognizing that within the context of the monastic community, it doesn't matter whether I'm a good practitioner or not. In some ways it does. But the fact that even trying to keep these precepts, live this life, has an impact that I had no idea could be of benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So that it takes the big self about whether I'm any good at it or not out of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, let's dedicate. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.